Let me tell you about the night my husband vanished. No fight. No warning. No goodbye. Just a white envelope on the kitchen counter, and a silence so deep it had a sound. For 5 months, my father told me the same thing, every time I cried. Men like him always run, he said. He wasn't built for your world, and I almost believed him. Almost then, on a Tuesday morning, I walked onto one of my company's construction sites, and I saw my husband, covered in concrete dust, lifting steel beams, working as a laborer, and when he finally told me the truth, the real reason he left, I didn't just cry. I made a decision. Stay with me. Because before you hear what he said, you need to understand everything that came before it. The life I had. My name is Elise Hargrove. I am 34 years old. On paper, my life looked like a fairy tale. My father, Gerald Hargrove, built one of the largest real estate empires in the country. By the time I was 28, I had taken over a significant portion of the company. Business magazines ran my photo. They used words like visionary and powerhouse. I smiled in those photos. I was grateful, but the person those magazines never talked about was my husband, Marcus. Marcus Chen didn't come from money. He came from a small town 3 hours outside the city, the son of a school teacher and a plumber. He wore simple clothes. He drove an old truck he'd repaired himself. He didn't own a suit until the day we got married, and he borrowed it from his cousin. My father noticed immediately. He didn't say it directly at first. He was too smart for that, but I felt it. In the way he looked at Marcus across the dinner table. In the way he never used his name. In the way he always called him, your friend, for the first 2 years. As if calling him my husband might make it more real than he could accept. One evening, our son Daniel was just 3 years old, asleep upstairs. My father and I sat alone after dinner. The staff had cleared the plates. The house was quiet. He swirled his wine slowly. You know I want what's best for you, he said. I know, Dad. Hargrove women have always married strength, he said. Men who could carry something. I looked at him carefully. Marcus carries plenty. My father smiled. That patient, dismissive smile I had known my whole life. He carries lumber, Elise. That's not what I mean. What do you mean? He leaned forward. My colleague Patterson has a son. Stanford. Runs 3 investment funds. He's asked about you. I stared at him. I'm married, Dad. That's a choice that can be revisited. I put my glass down. I didn't raise my voice. I simply said, this conversation is over. And I went upstairs. But I never forgot what he said. Not completely. The night he vanished. It was a Wednesday in March. Raining. The kind of rain that doesn't stop. Just fades from heavy to steady and back again. I had been in back-to-back investor meetings since 7 that morning. My phone battery had died at noon. I'd borrowed a charger at the office but missed 3 calls. I didn't look at who they were from. When I got home at 9:15, the house felt wrong immediately. Not messy, not broken, just absent, the kind of quiet that means someone isn't coming back. Daniel's backpack was gone. His stuffed elephant, the one he couldn't sleep without, was gone. His shoes by the door were gone. I called out anyway. Marcus? Nothing. Daniel? Nothing. The white envelope was on the kitchen counter, my name in Marcus's handwriting. Neat, careful. Like everything he did. Inside were divorce papers. Signed. Dated. Waiting only for my signature, I must have stood there for a very long time, because the next thing I knew, the rain had stopped, and I was sitting on the kitchen floor with the papers in my lap, not remembering when I'd sat down. I called his phone, straight to voicemail. I called his brother, his sister, his oldest friend from home. No one had heard from him. No one knew anything. Or at least, that's what they said. By morning, my father was at the door. He walked in like he owned the space. He always walked like that. In any room, even mine, he looked at the envelope on the counter. He looked at my face, and he sighed. Not the sigh of a worried father. The sigh of a man who was not surprised. So, he said simply. He took Daniel, I said. My voice sounded foreign to me. Hollow. He'll bring the boy back, my father said. He's not stupid enough to run with a child. How are you so calm right now? I asked. He sat down at my kitchen table. Because I'm not shocked, Elise. Men like him, without roots, without standing, they crack under the weight of a life they can't support. I told you years ago. He didn't crack, I said. Something happened. Marcus wouldn't sign the papers. He slid them toward me, casually, like it was a memo about a deal. I looked at him. Sign them, he said again. Close this chapter. I'll have Patterson's son call you. Start fresh. Something cold moved through me. I picked up the papers, folded them, put them in my bag. I'm not signing anything, I said. My father's jaw tightened. You're embarrassing yourself. Maybe. I stood up and walked to the door. But I know my husband, and I'm going to find out what really happened. He called after me. You're wasting your time on a man who already walked out. I didn't answer. I walked out of my own kitchen and started looking. I hired 3 different private investigators over 5 months. I personally visited every place Marcus had ever mentioned. His hometown, his old job sites, his cousin's house. Nothing. It was like he had folded himself into the city and simply disappeared. My father was patient during those months, almost gentle. He checked in regularly, brought food, sat with me. In hindsight, I understand what that was. He was watching the clock, making sure I was moving on the way he'd planned. He had people tell me things. Small things. Whispers that found their way back through mutual friends. I heard he was seen with someone. I think he took money from your accounts before he left. A man like that was never going to stay. None of it was true. But after 3 months of silence, the lies start to feel like gravity. And Daniel, my son, was with Marcus's sister, though I didn't know that then. I just knew he was gone. That his room was too quiet. That I kept buying his cereal by habit and then standing in the cereal aisle, holding the box, not understanding why I was crying. I almost signed the papers twice. Almost, both times, something stopped me. Not logic. Not hope, exactly. Just the absolute certainty, bone deep, quieter than reason, that Marcus would not leave without a reason. He was not that man. Month 5. A Tuesday. I had a site visit, scheduled at the Northfield development. A large mixed-use complex. My company was building on the east corridor of the city. It was a routine visit. Safety check, progress review, meet with the on-site manager. I wore a hard hat over my blazer. I had 3 meetings after this. My assistant was already texting about the afternoon schedule. My mind was, as it always was now, somewhere between the site in front of me and the unanswerable question that never left. We walked through the main section. The manager pointed out the completed foundation work, the framing on the upper floors, the timeline for the next phase. I nodded, asked questions, took notes, and then my feet stopped. Not gradually. Not after a slow recognition. They just stopped. My brain went completely still. Across the site, maybe 30 yards away, a man was lifting a steel support beam with 2 other workers. He was wearing worn work pants and a gray t-shirt dark with sweat at the back. His hair was longer than I remembered. He was thinner, but I knew the way he held his shoulders. I knew the way he planted his feet when he was bearing weight. I knew that body the way you know a song you learned as a child. Not from memory, but from somewhere deeper. Miss Hargrove? The site manager was looking at me strangely. Are you all right? I didn't answer him. I was already moving. My heels were wrong for this terrain. I didn't care. I walked fast across gravel and packed earth, past workers who stepped aside when they saw my expression. He hadn't seen me yet. He was focused on the beam, counting with the other men. 3, 2, 1. And then he set the beam down, turned to grab his water bottle, and he saw me. The water bottle dropped. 5 months of pain, of silence, of cereal boxes and empty rooms and nights. I didn't sleep. 5 months compressed themselves into a single moment. And before I could stop myself, before I could breathe or think or choose, my hand moved. The sound of the slap rang across the site like something breaking. Workers went still. Someone dropped a tool. Somewhere behind me, the site manager inhaled sharply. Marcus didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't raise his hands. He just looked at me. His eyes, I'll never forget his eyes in that moment. Not angry, not ashamed, just tired, the exhausted, bottomless tired of a man who has been carrying something unbearable for a very long time. You left us, I said. My voice was shaking. You left our son. You left me divorce papers and walked out like, not here, he said quietly. There. My voice cracked on the word, right here, right now, you tell me. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he looked around at the watching workers. He closed his eyes, and then he told me. Your father came to see me, he said, the night before I left. The words landed slowly like stones sinking in water. He came to the house? No. Marcus shook his head. He called me. Said he needed to meet privately. He had something important to tell me about you. I felt something shift in my chest. I met him at a restaurant across town. He came with two men I didn't recognize. They sat at the table with us. Marcus looked down at his hands. Rough, cracked, a worker's hands now. He was very calm, Marcus continued. That was the thing that scared me most. He wasn't angry. He wasn't emotional. He just laid it out. Like a business proposition. What did he say? My voice was barely there. Marcus looked up at me. He said that if I didn't sign the divorce papers and disappear, permanently, Daniel would have an accident. The construction site went very, very quiet, or maybe the noise was still there. Maybe it was just that my entire body had stopped receiving it. He said it exactly like that? I whispered. He said, children at that age are so vulnerable. So many things can go wrong. Marcus's jaw tightened. Then he put a file on the table. Photos of Daniel at his school, at the playground, at your mother's house. Taken recently. I pressed my hand over my mouth. He wanted me gone, Marcus said. He wanted you free to marry Patterson's son. He said you'd resist at first. I pressed my hand over my mouth. He wanted me gone, Marcus said. He wanted you free to marry Patterson's son. He said you'd resist at first. Those were his words. She'll resist at first, but that you'd come around once I was out of the picture. My father had said almost exactly that to me. She'll come around. The two men with him, Marcus said quietly. One of them had a photo on his phone. He showed me. It was Daniel in the park from that morning. To prove they were already watching. I felt the ground tilt slightly. So you left, I said. It wasn't an accusation anymore. It was barely a sentence. I left that night, Marcus said. I packed while you were still at work. I called my sister and drove Daniel to her. I told her not to contact you, that it wasn't safe. And then I found work. Cash work. Different sites every few months, so no paper trail. He gestured around him. At the dust, the steel, the hard hat hanging off a nearby scaffold. I've been hiding in plain sight, he said softly, moving around enough that his people couldn't track me. Waiting for what? I asked. He looked at me with those exhausted, quiet eyes. Waiting to see if you'd stop looking for me, he said. Because if you'd signed the papers and moved on, then I'd know his plan had worked. And staying gone would have been the safest thing I could do for both of you. A tear ran down my face. I didn't wipe it. And if I didn't stop looking? He almost smiled, just barely, the ghost of the man I married. Then I'd know you still believed in me, he said. And I'd have to figure out how to deserve that. I didn't go home that night. I sat in my kind car in the construction site parking lot for almost an hour, watching the last workers leave. Marcus sat in the passenger seat. Neither of us spoke much. There was too much to say, and sometimes too much becomes a kind of silence. Finally, I said, I want to see Daniel. Tomorrow, he said. I'll call my sister tonight. I nodded, then I said, my father is hosting his annual investors' dinner in 2 weeks. Marcus went quiet. He knew what that meant. It was my father's most important event of the year. 80 people. Old money, new money, board members, city officials, the gathering where my father was at his most powerful, his most comfortable, where he performed his generosity and his vision, and his authority, and everyone applauded. Elise. Marcus started. He threatened our son, I said. He dismantled our family. He lied to my face for 5 months and watched me fall apart. Marcus was quiet. He will answer for it, I said, in front of every person whose risks he spent his whole life cultivating. I started the car. But first, I said, let's go get our son. The Hargrove annual investors' dinner was held at my father's estate. Valets, string quartet, 12-course menu prepared by a private chef. My father wore his best charcoal suit, his silver cufflinks, the ones my mother had given him 30 years ago, before she passed. I wore a navy dress and my grandmother's pearl earrings. I arrived exactly on time. Not early, not late. He noticed. He always noticed. Elise. He kissed my cheek. His hand rested briefly on my shoulder, the proud father gesture, performed for whoever was watching. You look wonderful. Thank you, Dad. He guided me into the room. Introduced me to several board members, 2 city council representatives, a senator's wife, and there standing near the bar was Patterson's son. Clean-cut, expensive watch. He looked at me with a prepared smile, the smile of a man who had been briefed on the situation. My father leaned close and murmured, he's been looking forward to meeting you properly. I'm sure, I said. Dinner was served. Toasts were made. My father spoke beautifully about the company, about legacy, about family. He was luminous. He always was in rooms like this. I ate my dinner. I smiled at the right moments. I waited. When the dessert plates were being cleared, and the room had relaxed into that warm, wine-softened state where people's guards come down, I stood up. The room noticed immediately. When Elise Hargrove stands at her father's dinner table, people pay attention. I'd like to say something, I said simply. My father looked up. His expression was pleasant, curious. He had no reason yet to be anything else. I've spent the last 5 months believing something that wasn't true, I began. My voice was calm, steady. I had practiced this the way you practice testimony, not to perform, but to remain clear when it mattered. I believed my husband walked out on me and our son. I believed it because someone I trusted told me that was what happened. The room shifted slightly. People glanced at each other. My father set down his wine glass. Slowly. His eyes were on me now, with a different quality of attention. 2 weeks ago, I continued, I found my husband. He was working as a construction laborer on one of our company's sites. He'd been moving from site to site for 5 months, staying off the books, living on cash. Silence spread through the room. He wasn't hiding from me, I said. He was hiding from a threat. My father's face had gone very still. Someone came to him the night before he disappeared, I said. Someone brought 2 men and photographs of our 4-year-old son, taken that very morning, and he told my husband, disappear, sign the papers, and never come back, or the boy would have an accident. A sharp intake of breath from somewhere at the table. Clara, that's... My father started, Gerald. The use of his name stopped him completely. I had never called him that in my life. I'm not finished. The room was completely silent now. My husband spent 5 months sleeping in worker housing, eating whatever he could afford, watching our son through his sister's phone, because he was too afraid to make contact and put us in danger. He did this, all of this, because someone told him that was the only way to keep our child safe. I looked directly at my father. That someone was you. The senator's wife covered her mouth. 2 board members exchanged a glance. Patterson's son was very still. My father's face cycled through several things. Disbelief, performed. Injury, performed. And then, underneath those, something real. The cold calculation of a man deciding how to manage a situation. That is a very serious allegation, he said carefully. And I think He described the restaurant, I said. The corner booth. The file folder you put on the table. The specific photographs. The exact words you used. I paused. Children at that age are so vulnerable. So many things can go wrong. The silence in the room became something physical. I have also, I added quietly, spoken to one of the men who was with you that evening. He was more forthcoming than you might expect when offered the appropriate incentive. My father's hands, resting on the tablecloth, very slowly curled. You did this because you wanted me to marry someone else, I said. Someone who would merge portfolios and strengthen the empire. You decided my family was an inconvenience, and you removed it. I reached into my clutch and took out a single folded document. I set it on the table. That is my resignation from the Hargrove Group, I said. Effective immediately. My legal team will be in contact about my personal shares. Gasps, quiet voices. The sound of a chair scraping back. My father stood up. Elise, you don't understand what you're... I understand everything, I said softly. For the first time in 5 months, I understand everything perfectly. I picked up my clutch. You told me love doesn't build empires. I looked at him. Really looked, the way you look at someone you're memorizing, because you don't know when you'll see them again. You were right. Love doesn't build empires. I took a breath. It builds something better. And I walked out of the room. Marcus was outside. He was standing by the car, not leaning on it. Standing, the way he stood when he was ready for something. He was wearing the suit from our wedding. His cousin had kept it. When he saw me coming through the gates, he exhaled, long and slow, like he'd been holding that breath for 5 months. I walked straight to him. I didn't say anything dramatic. There wasn't anything left to say that our eyes hadn't already covered. I took his hand. Let's go home, I said. Where is home? He asked. It was the same question. We both knew it. Wherever Daniel is, I said, that's home. He nodded. And we got in the car. In the months that followed, my father tried 3 times to contact me. I returned the first call, out of a habit of love that doesn't disappear just because it should. He did not apologize. He explained. There is a difference. I stopped returning the calls after that. I used my personal shares to co-found a development firm, with 2 former Hargrove colleagues who also had things to say. Within 18 months, we had 3 active projects and a reputation that had nothing to do with my father's name. Marcus went back to school part-time, civil engineering. He'd always wanted to. He just never had the space, or the courage, or a wife who was looking clearly enough to notice. Now I notice. Daniel is 6 now. He's obsessed with excavators. He has no idea what happened those 5 months. Someday, when the words are right, and he's old enough to carry them, we'll tell him. We'll tell him that his father loved him enough to give up everything, and his mother loved his father enough not to stop looking. People sometimes ask me if I regret walking out of that dinner. If I regret leaving behind everything my father built, I tell them the same thing every time. My father was right about one thing. Love doesn't build empires. But I've realized I never wanted an empire. I wanted a family, and I almost let someone take it from me. Almost. Heartline Secrets. He threatened to kill our son. My father did it himself.